Already?
Frshly Pressed on the Smooth 98.1.
Talking about studio, mics are up. Good morning to you, Lagos, and thank you very much for joining us from every part of the world. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth 98.1, the Smooth Breakfast with Valentine Ohu.
And Ayo Mairo Ese, good morning and welcome back to work.
It's a new week to get back to work and resume school. Traffic is just finding its way back in Lagos, although some people are just wishing, no, I hope it doesn't happen. But here we are going to go into detailed analysis of our newspaper stories. Joining us to do analysis to these, we have Tunde Okufi at Big Coops. Good morning.
Morning, Valentine.
Good morning to you.
Morning, Ayo.
Morning today.
The air is not that happy anymore. And of course, Mr. C at D Mr. C. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Valentine. Good morning,
morning.
Tunde. Good morning, Lagos.
Welcome. Join the conversation by sending us messages through WhatsApp 0809-444-0981.
On Twitter, we're at Smooth981FM. Kindly use the hashtag Frshly Pressed 981. We're streaming live on YouTube as well, so kindly go there and send us your message through the live chat option.
Did you have light over the weekend? It seems that some of the challenges that we've experienced in the past and still experiencing in terms of power supply in Nigeria seems to be coming into conversation again this week. Something that would have brewed some anxiety. There was this rumor that was just going around that there was a tariff increase as commissioned by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. But Mr. C, this report from the Vanguard seems to be debunking that report. The headline reads, NERC denies increase in electricity tariff as consumer groups kick. Your thoughts on this story?
Okay, so at the end of last year, there was a minor review of the tariffs under the multi-year tariff order, and tariff plans for various consumers spread over the country were reviewed. Now, the initial plan was for those tariff price increases to come into effect on the 1st of January 2020. But guess what? They suspended it to April 2020. So this statement is clever by half, because whilst they are saying it has not yet been approved, it has been approved, but the execution has been delayed to April. So what it is they have reviewed the cost reflective tariffs as determined by the National Electricity Regulatory Commission and the actual tariffs being paid by the end consumers. Now, Lagos and Nigerians, get ready for this. There is an electricity subsidy. The federal government is committed to paying the differential between what the consumers are actually paying currently and what they should be paying. So by April 2020, there's going to be a minor review of the tariffs being presently paid. And the plan is by the end of 2021, tariff prices, electricity tariff prices in Nigeria will be cost reflective. The subsidy ends. Now, there have been complaints and responses by consumers saying that they haven't been metered and that even some of the bills being sent presently are being disputed. Now, without any doubt, there are challenges in Nigeria's electricity industry. And one of the major challenges is funding. Now, there's a discrepancy between what we generate and what we distribute. And the truth of the matter is, for the required amount of investment needed over the next 10 years, the tariffs have to be reflective, cost reflective, if we're going to attract the private investors to come in and put in their money. Presently, what we're paying, as bad as this may sound, is not cost reflective.
Thank you. Very detailed there.
Yes, we've had this conversation a number of times as to it's like it's the chicken egg situation. So people have asked, okay, should we get good service before they increase tariff or before it becomes cost reflective, or should they at least, or should we start paying and then electricity will improve? But it seems like
because of the level of mistrust,
Yes.
and lack of confidence in the authorities or those who are metering or those who are supposed to be providing these services, it makes sense to regulate the service. So just make sure that you provide the necessary tools like meters, ensure that like it's cost reflective, like Mr. C said. Once they see that, once the situation has been normalized,
Yes.
in a sense, then you can now implement
No,
the new
quick one.
changes?
I was speaking to an industry player over the weekend. Yeah, and just to educate Nigerians, Siemens has been contracted by this administration to overhaul the transmission system and even parts of the distribution system. Currently, we're generating over 7,000 megawatts of power currently, but only 5,000 plus is being distributed. So it's 2,000 megawatts that's nowhere.
Even that 5,000, right? We're under distributing so the capacity is meant to be ideally 7,000, but from what I know, in reality, it's actually less than that 5,000 that's being distributed across the country.
So our distribution process still has its setbacks and its difficulties. So there's a plan in place which has started, and the first phase of that plan should end by first quarter 2020. The plan is to recoup that 2,000 megawatts that is seemingly lost, and Nigerians will notice that power supply will improve generally across board.
Yes.
But more importantly, going forward, the distribution process will be overhauled because the distribution companies are challenged by cash
and capacity.
Yes, because as of November last year, 11 out of 17 distribution companies were technically insolvent. So the federal government is determined to sort this out.
Thank you so much, Mr. C. Our next story is from the Guardian newspaper. Tunde, police issue nationwide red alerts over the killing of the Iranian general. When I saw this news, I thought it was a foreign story, but I mean, it sounds funny, right? But this is what's happening. It's the reality that the world is seeing. But we know that we have U.S. installations in most parts of the world, especially in Nigeria. And the threats that have come, they've been flying from back and forth, Iran to US, US to Iran over the weekend. What are your thoughts, especially highlighting Nigerian crime?
Just like you, initially when I read the headline, I couldn't resist but chuckle. In fact, I did more than chuckle, which is, but I won't say that. So, but the truth is, the world is a lot more interconnected than today than it was before. Nations are a lot less insular. So not just U.S. military installations here, or officers that come and work as attaches either with with the embassy or with our government and our own armed forces. We also have the IMN, right? And a number of people have described them as a proxy to Iran. They may decide, and we know all the the issues that they've had before any of this, the Shiites thing,
the El Zakzaky case,
exactly.
And everything.
So if you add this on top of that, and then they decide to have a solidarity march, there's already a touchy group, so to say, right? Imagine they decide to have a solidarity march. It can spark up all sorts of things. So this notice is in line. Things that will then question and wonder is what's our readiness, how equipped are they to deal with all of this. But I mean, he's doing his job, being equipped and then or informing the public are two separate things. And we can't say, unfortunately, when giants fight, when the elephants fight, they say the grass suffers, and we're pretty much grass in this scale of things. So, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't protect ourselves. And
but we really need to be alert.
Yes, we should.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We have some comments here from WhatsApp. If you'd like us to read your WhatsApp message, you would need to please put your name there, please. Thank you. Emmanuel from Frshly says, greetings. Chicken egg theory not applicable. PPM first. Customer base increased. If all properly metered, cost reflective pricing may actually come down. Can a solely private sector implement the present formula and still exist? They will lose their customers. All right, all right, okay, so a few more comments have come through. Kindly send to either WhatsApp, Twitter, or YouTube. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to our next story, this time from the newspaper. We're ready to take over security, still on the issue of security. We're ready to take over security from military in volatile states. That's what the police is saying to reassure Nigerians, because a few people expressed skepticism last week, towards the end of last week, when the military announced its move, to just reduce their presence in certain areas that they feel like they've curtailed the volatile issues to an extent there. They said that the police, that is, saying that as the lead agency in internal security operations, they're working on the modalities, on the deployment of personnel and other resources to such states. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. C?
Okay, so a quick background. At a Security Council meeting held last week,
Mm.
the president announced that the military would be withdrawing from certain states in the northeast where they've been previously stationed, and that the police will replace them. Now, it is believed that that move was informed by the fact that manpower and financial needs are being stretched by the military's involvement in areas where the police ordinarily should hold the fort. Now, a proper plan and a detailed plan has not been released yet, but here are my concerns. We hear the police spokesman saying that the police is ready to take over. First question, if you were capable of doing what you are suggesting now, the military should never have been called in the first place.
No, well, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from, but
Now, more importantly,
in a sense, that's a bit generalistic.
No.
Just to say that as if you're downplaying the police
no,
capacity.
the police to a large extent is good, but what they're up against, ISWAP, Boko Haram.
Yeah.
Now, ISWAP and Boko Haram have shown that in some engagements, they're even better armed than the Nigerian army. And it is no secret here that the Nigerian army is better armed, better funded than the Nigerian police. There's no dispute there.
Yes, but for the level of threat that this situation posed, it only makes sense that in the scheme of things, military were meant to handle that situation. We're meant to curtail the terrorist acts and attacks from on the borders of Nigeria and around those regions.
Yes, so constitutionally, it's the police that should maintain internal security constitutionally. But here there was a lacuna, or there was an immediate issue that needed to be addressed, and the police could not effectively address it. Not that he could not address it at all. Now, my concern is, yes, the military can pull out because the commander-in-chief has given the order, right? And it was at a meeting where everyone deliberated. Now, what happens when the military pulls out, and then the insurgents or the enemy combatants, knowing that the military has pulled out, return? Will the police have, one, the numbers to adequately face these threats? That's one. Two, would they have the funds? Because this was an expensive exercise conducted by the federal government.
Yes, but you wouldn't expect the military to just pull out on the whim of, just surface analysis of the situation. They would have carried out their appraisal of what the presence of the militia is in certain areas. They would have understood the level of success they've recorded, how much areas they've cordoned off, security measures like that before they take that move.
Yeah, that's why I said there was a meeting, there were extensive deliberations.
No, I know, that's just to answer your question as to what if
but
it comes back again.
Circumstances and scenarios are fluid, Valentine. That's what we need to understand.
Yeah.
So the information they relied on to arrive at this decision, I cannot fault it because I haven't seen it.
Yes.
And I trust that they've done the proper thing.
And they have the expertise.
Yes. But in the intervening period, as they're pulling out, let's be honest, situations could change again. And that information that they relied on them might now be stale and no longer be relevant. So,
but do you necessarily believe that the military is pulling out 100%?
They will pull out substantially.
That's there it is the answer.
But a substantial pullout.
All right, so we have comments with regards to Nigeria reacting to red alerts over Iranian generals. Some people of the opinion that we shouldn't be bothered. Others are like, yes, we should.
Be.
Big T says Iran versus USA, no Nigerian was killed, no Nigerian property destroyed. So let them sort themselves out. We have other problems to settle. On the other hand, Charles says, in a country that retaliated with more killings over the religious cartoon in Denmark, the country needs to be worried over Iranian general killed. Like you said, the world is interconnected. And then we have from Yinka, when I saw the news on IG placing security agents on red alert, I was like, how? What concerns us? I thought the missile strike was far away Middle East. Please, Nigerians should be guided. We have enough problems in our hands to last us for the years. Let's not be unfortunate.
Maybe what people don't realize that IMN has issued
the Islamic
threats.
movement,
Islamic movement in Nigeria have issued, and like you said, they're proxy to Iran, and this war, or if this fight or this battle, you can call it war, will be fought asymmetrically. It won't be a conventional war where both armies are facing each other.
The world has become a global village, so we have to be mindful of that.
Tunde, please let's talk about right away, as there seems to be a price increase from the initial fee of between 300 to 500 naira per linear meter to about 3,000 and 6,000 per linear meter, over 1,000% increase. Lagos and 13 other states, including Kaduna, Enugu, Adamawa, and Ebonyi, they've announced this hike. How does this play out for especially the telecoms operators who are bearing this cost?
Everything is going up. I mean, literally, when we've spoken about prices, this
2020,
today, everything
the year
is
of
just
increments.
the year of increments. Finally, we have a tag of 2020.
Oh, wow.
It is the year of increments. Let's hope our revenues and the blessings go up as well. But yes, and this is quite a significant hike from 300, the initial fee of between 300 to 500 per linear meter to 3,000 to 6,000. That's quite a significant near mind-boggling hike. Now, right away, for people who may not know what it is what gives, if you have property, right away is what you'd give to someone to pass over your property or do stuff on your property. I mean that all land is owned by government, not by us, and we're all leasing it, and we're all tenants in this nation. The government, it's not unique to Nigeria anyway. Governments will give right away for companies to pass over or do whatever it is that you can argue that there are multiple. It's almost like it's a fee or a tax on going over my property, and this hike affects telecom companies because they need to lay infrastructure, especially fiber, for high-speed internet.
Yeah.
Now, there are many ways to look at this. Some nations have taken a look at and taken the view that having high-speed broadband internet is integral to national development. Therefore, maybe I'll make concessions around this so that sector can boom and grow. And what they wouldn't do is increase it. A tax or a levy to sort of stifle that, right? I mean, you can take Rwanda, for instance, that said, broadband, they've laid a lot of internet, broadband. You can say Rwanda is a much smaller place than Nigeria, which is true. But even look at the West, part of Boris Johnson's, a country as developed as the UK, part of Boris Johnson's campaign promises, and the guy who lost Corbyn was, high-speed internet broadband. So it's integral to development, it's integral to so many things. So you may look at that this might not be the best thing to do, but there are, I'll get to what the counter arguments are. Then they point out and they say, okay, that this is just a starting point, as the governments and the state governments that have done this say this is just a starting point, and companies can, come to a negotiating table. So it's probably one of those taxes where we raise things very high, expecting that we'll meet somewhere in the middle. The other point to note is and this is one thing I'd always like us to do, is that there isn't always a cohesion in our tariffs. So the federal government has a set of tariffs, the state government has a set of tariffs. The federal government tariffs are still at maybe 842 naira per linear meter. The state right away was always higher, but now look, with the state increase, look at the discrepancy between the federal government's right away and the state government's right away. As a business, you want more of that, you want more cohesion, so you can plan better. But now here's the flip side, because as I was reading this, I was like, what happens? Think of Virgin Mobile, right, in the UK, telecom operator didn't own any infrastructure, right? It was all BT infrastructure, so it was brand and service, right, riding on someone else's infrastructure. And as a customer, you never know that that Virgin didn't have its own infrastructure. So not everyone needs to lay down infrastructure. That's a problem why you see someone dig up a road today, they cover it, so they're laying fiber. Tomorrow, someone else is digging up the same part.
The access for our office, coming into Adiola,
it's always happening.
It's blocked up because of work that started since before New Year.
Absolutely, I saw that too.
Yeah.
It's those type of things. So they want coordination. So you can look at the hike as more of a deterrent for you to act individually. So they're saying that, look, the federal government itself has plans to put down national infrastructure and encourage that. But what they want to do is more like concession, one entity. So it's sort of a one dig policy, as they describe it. Dig once, put down proper infrastructure, and all your operators can use it instead of everybody coming to dig.
Exactly.
All right, thanks, Tunde.
Does this affect the power distribution companies anyway? Does it affect electricity or just telcos?
No, so this is telcos.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. So Kunle Bangoye from Ipafako says it's good to have appropriate charge for energy. Will this new rate make the discos responsible for replacement or repairs of the equipment such as transformers, cables, and so on? The consumers are the ones directly contributing money to fix all this. Please clarify. Well, I want to assume that that's what I mean. One of the responsibilities
what
is to
is it,
ensure.
sorry?
So the infrastructure, repair of equipment, and things like that from this new
They
tariff.
find a way to factor it in,
Yes.
but it's
actually
it's
always been a
minute. It's always
responsibility.
so that's why we're still having this conversation about cost reflective tariffs,
Yes.
because everything has come down to the well.
All right, let's move on to our next headline. Tunde, federal government to give visa on arrival policy adequate publicity. Very short story, and I just wanted us to
Yeah,
touch
to
on
touch
this
on it
real
very
quickly.
quickly. Yeah, yes, and they should, because they have made some changes. Initially, visa arrival was only open to business travelers, and if you look at the list, you think, I mean, it was a very narrow list. You had to be a business traveler, or you had to have a diplomatic passport and invitation from the company. It isn't as in Nigeria. There's still a bunch of hoops and jumps, but what they have done is that they've added categories for African nationals as well,
Yes.
and a category very importantly for tourism. So you don't have to be a business visitor to get a visa on arrival. You can also get a visa on arrival as a tourist, and I think these are important changes and steps. And of course, it needs to be paired with publicity. This statement, incidentally, this statement was made by Ogbeni Rauf, the internal minister of the Minister of Interior. Sorry,
Yes.
he made the statements in Egypt, and I know, for instance, that for a European national, before for a European national to get a visa into Nigeria is a lot more affordable than an Egyptian, right? So I think last I heard maybe it cost up to $1,000 for Egyptians to get visas in Nigeria. And if we're talking about that, inter-Africa trade,
Yes.
all of these things need to be worked on, and these barriers sort of resolved.
All right, thank you very much. You also talked about debunking the videos that have been going around that it's not from the immigration service, and this is what happens when we don't have adequate information.
Yeah, when the government isn't putting out its own word, then other things come out, misinformation.
Absolutely, thank you. I move on to the Guardian newspaper, Mr. C. Your position on medical tourism deceitful, self-indicting, PDP tells Buhari. Now, this is on the back of a statement made by the president on Friday, 3rd of January, during the inauguration and handover of a completed project to the Alex Ekweme Federal University Teaching Hospital. The president is quoted to have said, Nigerians have suffered so much going abroad for medical treatment. This is not good for us and it must stop because we can't afford it again. It's not the first time the president is sharing his sentiments about medical tourism. In April of last year, he spoke to his minister. November of last year, said the same thing. And people have accused him of actually not going by what he believes or what he says. Please take us to the story, Mr.
Okay,
C.
so quick recap, like you said. The project was inaugurated on Friday at the Alex Ekweme University, Federal University Teaching Hospital in Ebonyi State.
Yeah.
And the project was to check flooding and gully erosion.
Yeah.
Now, the president was actually represented by the Minister of Science and Technology.
Yes.
And he did say that Nigerians have suffered so much going abroad for medical treatment and they need to stop it. Now, it's a very interesting statement coming from our president and commander-in-chief, because in most organizations, when you want to get a message across, it is settled that the message must come from the top and percolate down. But here we have a president saying, don't do what I do, but do what I say.
Do as I say, not do what I do.
Now, this is a president who in his first term spent 1 calendar year and 37 days out of Nigeria for medical reasons. Out of 4 years, he was out of the country for 1 year. 1 calendar year. Now you're telling Nigerians we need to stop going abroad for medical treatment. Are our hospitals any good? Are they at a level that we'll all be happy with? There have been repeated incidences of Nigerian hospitals, Nigerian doctors completely misdiagnosing patients. And by the time the patients find out what is really wrong with them, it's almost terminal.
Let me ask a question though, Mr. C. Now, just to give a case for this statement and the president having to fly abroad for treatment, is this a blanket statement or is it just addressing people who have a headache, fly abroad, people who just want to do something, fly abroad, and then we have circumstances where we're not fully equipped to deal with? The reason I'm saying this is because we have medical tourism all around the world. It's not just Nigeria. However, we know it's been abused, grossly abused in Nigeria. Do you think that's what he's
Okay,
He
inferring?
didn't make that distinction.
Okay,
though.
so let me.
I'm just helping.
Now, this is an administration.
Yeah.
In the 2020 budget, listen to this: 427.3 billion naira was voted for health. That's about 4.5% of the budget, and that sum is supposed to cover 186 million Nigerians. I did the arithmetic. It comes to about 2,297 naira per Nigerian for 2020. How? It makes no sense. So it's one thing to say these things, but it's your actions that will speak louder.
Can I ask though,
Yes,
if the National Health Insurance Scheme was effective as one would hope, would that sum be enough? Would it be adequate? The 2,000,
No,
2,000
it's,
plus?
no, it still won't be.
Nowhere near. Nowhere near. Like,
All
so,
right.
my
Thank
take is very quick. I'm sorry. It's
But
animal farm.
I
All animals are equal, but some are more equal than
no, but I'll
others.
still have to say though that there's some conditions that need
Take
specialist
the
attention.
leaders of
Definitely.
the Western world and Israel.
Yeah.
Whenever they're sick, no matter what the problem is, they're not thrown outside their countries.
It's a matter of national security.
It's even a security risk to fly your president out of your country to another country.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Let's talk money. And today oh gosh, I don't know why we always have to be sitting on the side of POS every time it comes up. POS transaction charges. I know where you stand with that, and those who have listened to us a few times. Well, oil merchants bemoan 0.75% POS charges on dealers. Daily Times reports. We're still on this. They obviously, I know that one of the last organizations to comply with this directive was the oil match, well, at least filling stations. You go there and I'll be battling with them.
Trust me, they still haven't.
They
They
haven't complied.
They still have. No. I don't know anyone that has complied, and you can understand why.
All right, so please break it down to us, because
You
it's
can
really
understand why.
important.
See, and you just need to look at that sector. Historically, this sector has always had comes to electronic payments, especially POS payments.
Yeah.
Margins in that space are thin, very thin. They work on margins, and so it's a volume. It's a volume business. When you're making, half a kobo or 1 kobo on the liter, whatever it is, it's the volumes that add up.
Yeah.
The margins are important. Therefore, unit economics is important. The cost of every liter is important. So any price you add for carrying out a transaction on the POS is going to be significant. Now, historically, which is why, so this story surprises me a bit. What I'm aware of, what I know is that fuel stations or these marketers don't pay MDR or MSC. MDR is the merchant discount rate, what is charged to the merchant for carrying out a POS transaction. They're not billed that. It's either borne at some time very early on, it was borne by the cardholder. Then I think that was shifted to the bank to manage that, because the bank at least enjoys the floats from our merchants, right? So the merchants, they sort of absorb that, and then the merchant didn't bear that cost. So I'm a little surprised at 0.75. I suspect it's probably misinformation. I don't think they bear the 0.75 fee, everybody else does. And the truth is, even this 0.75 fee is dated, because the new fee is 0.5. Last year, before this round of changes, the central bank had changed everything to 0.5. So I suspect this story is wrong in its entirety. One, it's not 0.75 any longer, and two, this sector don't pay an MDR for POS transactions. However, they pay the federal government 50 naira, or they're supposed to pay the federal government 50 naira stamp charge duty every POS transaction, and that is what, they're not the only ones, but where margins are thin, 0.75 is, for on most transactions, come to even less than the 50 naira that they're being asked for. Right, and 50 naira is significant. Remember, I said the margins are thin, right? Which is why I'm sure, maybe unless the NNPC wants, and I doubt, I don't think you find a fuel station that will agree to bear that 50 naira. They would rather tell you the POS isn't working.
Okay,
right.
So something just
so
very
something
quickly,
needs.
because
So
of
to
our
the
time,
point I need to make, that something needs to be. The concessions have always happened for this sector. They need that concession again.
So in terms of concessions, can the bank not bear the burden of
Another 15 naira. Come on now, Ayo.
What 50?
Why can't the government
let me
say there
start,
should be concession for this? The banks.
We don't
Look,
know no more
come on
concessions
now.
for all sectors.
Please.
But to be honest, though, Tunde, I know bankers will probably be.
Come on.
But the truth is that
They're not charities.
let them take it away from our account maintenance fees, let them take it away from our text message fees. happy birthday and so on.
I'm gonna. That's why I'm not at
And
the
you see,
CBN.
you see the
Thankfully-
profits crashing. The
thankfully.
banks will never agree to that. Now, Big T says, Happy New Year, people. Medical tourism. A president who practically has a permanent apartment in London saying he should not travel for treatment is laughable. Balaho said, the president's statement about Nigerians to stop seeking medical tourism is all sound bites. Our healthcare facility is underfunded and ill-equipped, and that of Aso Rock as well. Thank you very much. Lekon says it's not true that filling stations have not complied with the POS back charge. I first learned
I've not seen
and
any.
started paying the 15 naira from pump station fuel stations last
You
year.
see, that's what you
That's
don't
what I'm
understand. They're saying that it stopped and they're still charging you.
Yes.
You shouldn't pay. That's what we're saying.
Thank you so much, Tunde Okufi at Big Coops. You can find him up there on Twitter at Big Coops and have a conversation with him about the stories. Also, Mr. C's at the Mr. C. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, gentlemen. Next, we talk sports inside of the locker room. It's at 8:15.
We didn't get to talk about Zagzaki's feeding
Oh,
money.
yeah, that's our next